And then I will share my screen. Maybe buttons always move around. Okay, so the first group we want to talk about is composition analysis. Doesn't look like there's any needs. Oh, sorry, they're at the bottom. Okay, so we have these marked. This is mainly for Connor. When it says 100, that's meant to represent something that must get designed in this milestone, and the muscle army thing is a nice to have. So we try to use those as first steps in prioritization, and then we would use these numbers to help the PM and the designer would put them in an order that makes sense to their needs. And then we try to balance or measure each table or each group against each other to try and see who really does have the highest priority, so we can decide what designer might be able to move where. That's kind of the intent of this call. Okay, so this one's a little weird just because the top priority items are nice to haves, but then the lower ones are 100%. Does anyone know about that? I don't think Nicole's on the call.
I know the one that I'm assigned to at the very least has been done for a while, which is probably why it's lower. It's just there, I think, for tracking purposes.
Nicole's here.
Looking at my stuff. Sorry, I was on a call when it went long. Number 3 or number 4?
Are these truly, well, I mean, in general, are these truly higher priority since they have the 100% than these nice to haves?
So they're not higher priority because they're lower down the list, but they're basically done at this point. And so the only reason they're still on there is in case we end up having to need feedback. So like, I don't think any time really needs to be spent, just as like a warning, there might be a question, or we might decide to throw all of them out the window because of that, that other issue that I can't recall the name of, design:report. The one where we centralize warnings. Andy's nodding. He knows what I'm talking about.
The report notifications, that's like a centralized part of the UI on top of the report. Yes.
That doesn't show up. Thought maybe
Yeah, because it was something I was told, no, we're not doing that anytime soon, but it keeps coming up to the point that I may just have to be like, okay, is that still the sentiment? Because it's like rule of threes, it's come up 3 or 4 times in the past release, so.
Okay. All right, so these are just hanging out as reminders that the person that designed it may need to spend MR time, review time,
right, to look at yeah, but they should be very low amounts of work because we have a design, it looks good, I'm happy, the tech writers are happy.
Okay. Does that mean that because these are nice to haves then, that if we get to them, we get to them, cool, otherwise you're fine holding off? You don't have any work, in other words, that needs to get done for 15.0?
Yeah, for 15.0, there is nothing that is mandatory because those are definitely in like the 15.1, 15.2 land. So like next release, we will have a different conversation about them. But for this release, it's like, yeah, somebody has time.
So what that means to me is if everyone else ends up falling in a very similar boat, then we might be able to pick and choose people that can pick those up for 15.0. But we'll figure that out as we go on. All right.
And then all the 99s are like wishy list items. Nobody should prioritize them. But if you happen to trip over them for some reason, like, let me know.
All right, that works. Sam, so container security.
Yep, so I think Tim is starting work on that solution validation, which is great.
Yeah.
Actually surprised he's doing it. I kind of thought Katie was going to be doing it. So I'd known that he was going to do it. I guess I could have just done it. But anyway, I don't know. In any case, I think that's happening. And it's probably for the best since it interrelates with their team and we're going to need to have them bought into what we're doing anyway. So that one's just there for tracking. This team doesn't really have to worry about it other than maybe just to keep an eye on it or watch it if you have interest. Specifically for Matt or Andy, since it interrelates with vulnerability management.
Okay.
This next one is small. We really need to do something here. So thanks, Andy, for picking that up. This is important. There's a 10-minute delay every time you make changes to your policies, and we don't tell users about that anywhere in the UI. So up to a 10-minute delay, there's a background job that runs once every 10 minutes and applies all of the policy changes. So it's not ideal. It's something we want to fix, but for now, as at a minimum, we should be telling users about it.
Okay, so assuming Andy is
I'm
able
gonna
to get,
stock this because we have a very similar problem. So whatever you design, I might steal.
Sure, feel free to stock it, stock away.
since Andy said he's going to try and pick it up in 14.10, we could probably pull it from this 15.0 planning for now.
Yep, I put it in here because no one had picked it up yet, and
Yeah.
I was not sure if it was going to be done or not, but we really need it done in like sooner is better, especially because that policy page is already being used a lot. It's going to be used even more when the 15.0 release goes out and we actually remove vulnerability check from the product. I'm sure we're going to have lots of traffic being diverted to that page. Like I said, we already are getting a lot of usage of it, but it's just going to be that much more in 15.0. So if we could do something to address this before 15.0 or by 15.0, that would be ideal.
Okay. So Andy, just keep in mind that if you do end up busting this out in 14.10, that you can feel free to take this off.
Sure. Did we remove vulnerability check from the MR settings? Is that what?
That will happen in 15.0, yes.
Cool, awesome.
And we are working this release to add scan result policies into the merge request settings area so that it's kind of a read-only view, but that way they can see everything still in one place.
Is that going to be out in 15.0?
Maybe 14.10.
Okay, because I'm the release post manager for 15.0 and I will make that a top line item.
I think it'll go out in 14.10, but I have other items you can make a top line item in 15.0, so don't worry.
I will fight you, Sam. I will fight you.
All right. So yeah, other than this, so the next thing, it would be nice to have somebody, I put it as 100%. I wasn't sure if I should put it as that or a muscle arm stretch goal. I don't know what to call it. Nice to have, but the development team has been getting through their work quickly, and I think it's going to be cutting it close for when Camellia gets back. So this is the next thing up on the list. It would be nice to have someone look at this. I don't think that's number 3 is kind of just the next thing up on the list. So
okay. How accurate is this 15.2 need? Like, I assume that means they'll try and build it in 15.2, or right? So we at least have 15 or 15.1.
To start working on in 15.2. So that means design work would need to be done in 15.0 and 15.1.
Right. Okay. Cool.
So I'm just trying to raise this potentially earlier, just because I understand I don't have a full capacity designer on my group. And, this isn't a huge item, but if someone needed to work at like a little bit in 15.0 and a little bit in 15.1, that would be ideal. And then there are a bunch of other stretch ones down here. A lot of these some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. If anyone has bandwidth to pick them up, that would be great. But if not, we can probably get by until Camellia comes back.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone before we move on? All right, let's look at DAST.
Yeah, so the three issues in there are still largely a continuation of what we had going on from last milestone. So still working on problem validation analysis from the problem validation study we did on security configuration for CI/CD. There's 14 sessions there to analyze. So just going through, pulling out the insights and generating actual recommendations off those will take a little bit, but hoping to have this done by 15.0.
Hoping to have it done by the start or the end of 15.0?
The end of 15.0 to have
Okay.
everything fully analyzed, the insights to be pulled out and into GitLab and all of that.
Okay.
So then we can actually make use of them.
Right.
Yep. The next one, so the design's happening during this milestone and hopefully should be completed by the end of it, but there'll be a number of technical questions around what's possible and whatnot that I'm sure will spill over into the next milestone. And then based on how that conversation goes too, we'll probably have to run it through some solution validation.
So this could convert to the solution validation part.
Yep,
Possibly.
exactly. And then the last one is something that I just didn't, it was nice to have for last milestone, but it's just digging into profiles, looking at how we can redesign them, potentially introduce all of the additional fields that are available to DAS within those too. So it's really just digging into that design a lot more.
Okay.
For the first one, are you going to tag all the PMs on the outcome? Because
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. Once we actually pull out the insights, I'll tag the whole team and we'll go from there.
because I'm wondering if that can be ammunition for me to argue that I want to move a lot of the configuration out of CI YAMLs.
Yeah, it very well could be. At the very least, it may spark a research initiative around that too, because it's been a conversation for a while.
Yeah, one thing on that specific topic, I mentioned to Michael 20 minutes ago, the CI/CD like template atom building block thing that's happening in the marketplace for CI/CD things. Dove reached out to me, at least. I don't know if you to other people, but like that's something to keep in mind for that. No, Nicole?
Yeah, he didn't reach out to me.
Oh, okay.
But
I thought you
one
meant like
thing-
Darby Dragons.
oh, no. Like he didn't, like that sounds interesting. One hack we'd come up with previously would be if we weren't restricted by the nesting capability of those, we could have like protected YAML pieces that could be inherited because you can inherit. But there's a couple flaws with child pipeline artifacts and a couple other things. If those flaws were worked out and the levels of inheritance were increased, like we could still continue to use CI YAMLs in maybe a more centralized, controlled way, which is what a lot of people want, is the control and auditability and protection, which is hard to offer today. So I think there's many ways to, I would love a better analogy than skin a cat, because I don't want to skin cats, but you know what I mean? So it's just, I'll be interested to hear what their goals are, because maybe we can use that to push for some of those backlog items, because that could be an alternate.
Yeah, and I'll loop people in on UX to the extent that that comes in, but worth monitoring, I think.
Does that deprecate the need for the config area that we have in secure?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't think it would, but it might make it less janky. Okay.
Yeah, my sense is it's meant to just be less template centric, less like including templates from inside, more like you could version your SAST atom or whatever and pull it into your builds. Sort of like a Circle CI orb, if you've ever seen those.
They've been doing this thing called like latest and other things recently, which I think is possibly a precursor, and it does make life a little bit nicer. And so, yeah, it's like, this is a nice smooth thing. And so you can have like multiple different versions thereof. It doesn't need to be like the be all end all one template.
Okay. So keep that in mind. I suppose it's the right way to go. Anything else to add, Michael?
Nope, I think that pretty much covers it currently.
All right. SAST.
Yep, and then the
Similar.
SAS table is very similar. So the first one is just a duplication of the first one in the DAS table. And the second one may have an impact on the discussion we just brought up, but Connor and I were talking a little bit around the security configuration page. I know there's been other discussions around that, just some usability and UX concerns with it too. So we're thinking about maybe potentially finding time this milestone to start digging into the design of that. But obviously, I think there's some stuff to figure out with this whole conversation we just had about the pipeline library and such too.
And then also there are some dragons in there just because of the way things currently are, like some of the things that we have definitely had suggested by UX in the past, we just can't do. Like I want to do. So we probably want to have two separate conversations. One is this is where we want to get to. The other one of what's stopping us and how can we use any of these initiatives to pull a lever to get there. Because yeah, it's rough and we've known it's rough. It's just there's certain areas we just cannot pull the levers on yet.
And we should definitely talk across all of the scanner areas because this is something that DAST has been looking into for like 2 years. And we've come up with some ideas of how we can work through some of the issues here. And I don't think that the templating stuff is going to change much in terms of a need for this because it's still YAML focused, and at least DAST users are still wanting more of a UI configuration that has very little, if anything, to do with YAML.
I think you and I had discussed the possibility of having something where we generated a YAML out of a database as a child pipeline on demand, which was a hack around that I still think is completely valid if some of the child pipeline issues can get resolved, because that would mean that if you wanted to YAML your face off, you could, but you could also completely avoid the problem.
Yeah, definitely. Seth had come up with an idea of how we could work through that and actually had some issues drawn up. So we should sync up all of us around that area and configuration, figure out where we want the product to go, and then we can figure out the technical details of how we get there.
Yeah, contextually, the reason why it came up is like that's the only UI surface that my team actually maintains for SAST. But the other big area is code quality, and then like contributing things toward components that, as I understand, are owned by other teams. So like we're happy to like help out in the rest of Secure, but like I don't have a rhythm for like coordinating that yet with everybody. I need to get one.
I think the important thing, to keep in mind is sort of the overarching goal when Michael started going down this research effort was to see how we might be able to make scanner configuration consistent across all scanners. So I don't know how to balance that from an engineering perspective, but ultimately that's what we're hoping to accomplish. Make it easier, of course, more usable, but then also make sure that there's a consistency. Okay, that's what this was for, right, Michael? This isn't about the set configuration page itself, right? This is individual scanner configurations.
No, this is for the individual or the full page itself, but it sounds like there's a lot of, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's initially what I thought, but
the full page itself is a garbage fire. The individual pages themselves are also garbage fires. So
lots of
Speak
garbage.
for yourself. Ours is getting fixed. Michael did a great job with the new one.
I love the new design of the, yours is getting less, but it's still behind the scenes some hacks. I would love to figure out which levers, and then we all just copy DAST and we're done. Ta-da!
Exactly. That would be great. That way we're all consistent. In lieu of the configuration page, start page, home page, or whatever the hell we call that, I saw that Katie McCoy is doing a bunch of settings page gathering. I think her impetus is more about hierarchy from group to project, but it might have some relevance. So maybe keep an eye out for that when you do get to this.
Yep.
Well, it definitely, if they're leveraging the cascading in the workspaces, like we will have to figure out eventually how we work our way into that. In an ideal happy world, these would be front end div pieces that could be in 2 places, because people want to be able to configure for a group dependency scanning, because this whole group is Python, or for a
Right.
tag, all these tag things are Python, and they want to be able to configure it for all of them, which marries very heavily into compliance and configuration and other things. So from a product perspective, yeah, it is very much going to be something where we need to keep an eye on that and maybe make some stuff available.
Yeah, I think right now she's just trying to gather instances in order to figure out where overlaps are and to make things consistent. But I haven't heard anything mentioned on workspace at this point because the designer that was doing that has left. So I don't know how that's getting picked up, but clearly that is a consistent problem with GitLab as a product. So anyway, reach out to her when you get a chance just to look at the issue. I haven't dug into it because it was a deep conversation, but I just saw it happening, so worth checking in. All right, I don't think Beck is here, so Matt, this will be all you. What's happening with vulnerability management? Threat insights, whatever you want to call it.
Sorry, what?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Our big thing has been a research user interview study, both internal and with some customers on the, oh, I pasted the link, not the actual title, whoopsie. So what we're looking at is the next iteration, or really kind of evolution of filtering, and then potentially adding search to the vulnerability reports. Combined in that study is also the concept of grouping vulnerabilities and having saved views. Basically, I've got my filters, my grouping the way I want them. I want to save that for quick reference. We decided to cut the study a little bit shorter because we were getting really consistent results from it. TLDR on that, grouping, it turns out, may actually be more of a kind of a band-aid or a shortcut, or once people saw better filtering plus search side by side with grouping, the general sentiment was grouping could still be useful for some things, but I don't think that I actually need it, because what I really want is less results on the screen, and then I don't need to group anything. Make me the filters, make me the search. So
I will put an asterisk on there that may very well apply to the vulnerability page, but I'm planning to steal everything you do and put it on the dependency page, and grouping is a bajillion% necessary because people want to group by container or group by introduced dependency, etc.
yeah, I think what we were kind of realizing as we were getting to some of the nuances of the research was there are cases that we thought would be great for grouping at first, but then as some of the users were pointing out to us, they would actually really prefer a filter for that grouping functionality. And there were things that we hadn't thought about grouping that make more sense. And then there's some things that neither really handle that people might want, like a hierarchical view, like show me the folder structure of things, which I think Nicole is like 1000% something that would be useful on your side. So what we're going to do right now, just because it's overwhelmingly clear the search and filtering is more valuable, we're going to focus on that for right now. The grouping, we'll still keep doing that, but that's going to be like a later thing, given that we're still very much backend constrained, and this is going to be a lot of backend work. There's not a whole lot of other pressing things. We've got plenty of work.
Like, are you still back-end constrained on being able to get searching done?
That is going to be a whole other thing. So I actually made a spike to go investigate what are our options effectively. Like, what are the tools that we've got internally? What are the things that we maybe think that we would need to do? It is going to be related to some of the filtering, because as we get more advanced with some of these filters, and especially if we want to start doing fancy things like wildcards and actual like Boolean expressions, which also tested pretty highly, we're going to need something closer to like an Elasticsearch. We can't do that at a Postgres. It'll cry and fall over.
Just so you know, and Sam's going to kill me for this, but in my last job, Alan implemented an amazing Elasticsearch system with the, like, it was great, and he did it very well. So just throw that out there.
Well, also we just bought the ClickHouse thing, and like what ClickHouse is supposed to do is crunch and display. So
Correct. This is like a whole other conversation that doesn't need to go into this recording about that. The long and the short of it is the implementation of that is months away, much less any sort of test for fitness. So that could be an option by the time we get around to it. But
if in a couple months you are at a point where you want to do search and filter and you need an additional backend person, my new hire might be onboarded and useful by then. And so as long as I then immediately get to steal whatever the heck you did and put it on my page, I will help you.
you could steal away. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. We also have somebody that started on a new backend engineer last Monday on our team. So I'm hoping in the next month or two, they'll be a little bit more up to speed. But this is probably behind some of the outstanding pieces before we got sidetracked on all the scalability work. I think this is what I'm going to end up putting kind of next on the roadmap for stuff. This is going to be a non-starter to go to complete if we don't have at least the advanced search.
I just add a note, similar to Nicole, we have a strong need for grouping. So I understand your reasons for deferring it, but if you do have designs or an implementation plan or something, it's possible that we'll be wanting that.
Becca has some, and I've talked to her about them specifically for the dependency list page. So if we want to actually break that off into a separate issue, I think we probably both need this similar thing. So we might want to just be like, okay, we're breaking grouping away into a separate
it already
issue.
is, Nicole. They're like, so grouping is separate
from a non-vulnerability standpoint, like from a
Gotcha.
possibly container registry and dependency list perspective.
And she's got a fair amount of work started on it. It's more, I don't want to spend any more time trying to polish it or do the solution validation right now until we finish this piece.
Might be able
'Cause I
to stick
said-
with Becca and bring it into the SBOM work and just keep it in mind. Like, it's designed to be generic enough to become its own component for tables. So it doesn't need to be specific to an object type.
Yeah, at that point, you just need to use the control, but then figure out what types of things need to be grouped. Make the most sense to be grouped versus filtered.
Yep.
Okay.
Container type and introduced. I already know what they are.
We're at time, but I wanted to just finish up really quick that Becca seems like she's the only designer that has capabilities of picking up non-vulnerability management projects. So we will continue to discuss and figure out what that means for Sam and for Nicole. And also I want to point out that aside from this SaaS UX roadmap, extra stuff is going to be, our team is responsible for the UX showcase in April, end of April. Right now, Becca, I believe, is signed up and we have one more opening. So that could go either secure and protect or configure monitor. So just keep that in mind as extracurriculars when you're thinking about your capacity. And aside from that, thank you all. I appreciate it. This was helpful. And I think we're going to have a good 15-0. Yay. All right. Have a good day.